One special commandment among the 10 commandments has been used by God as a sign of loyalty to Him. Those who keep this special commandment show they are truly God's covenant people, the people of the book. Both Moses and Ezekiel wrote of this. Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Exodus 31, verse 13. Some time ago, in the video on the covenants, we learned that God wishes to change our hearts by writing His eternal, unchanging laws on our thoughts and in our minds. We saw that without this miracle, we are not capable of consistently obeying God's laws. This was illustrated with the people whom Moses led out of Egypt. After God's power had delivered them from slavery, and right after God gave them the 10 Commandments, God asked them to learn and recite the principles of His law, which run the entire universe that are eternal and unchanging. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Deuteronomy 6 verses 5 to 7. To illustrate the importance of reflecting on God's law and living it out, God told the people that the law should be like a bracelet on their hands or a sign placed at the center of their foreheads. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Deuteronomy 6 verse 8. How important is it for God's people to have His law constantly in their minds? It is vitally important. Only those who have His law on their minds and who have God's commandments written on their hearts can please God. To have His law in our minds is to be spiritually minded, for remember His law. The 10 Commandments run the entire universe and are eternal and unchanging. That the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because a carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. Romans 8 verses 4 to 7. This is why the prophet Isaiah said, for the law of God is to be sealed into the minds of the disciples. The sealing was a sign that says, this man keeps God's eternal law. Bind up the testimony. Seal the law among my disciples. Isaiah 8 verse 16. One special commandment among the 10 commandments has been used by God as a sign of loyalty to Him. Those who keep this special commandment show they are truly God's covenant people, the people of the book. Both Moses and Ezekiel wrote of this. Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Exodus 31 verse 13. Moreover, I also gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. Ezekiel 20 verse 12. You may recall from our last study that in end time God's faithful followers, also known as the people of the book, are distinguished by their refusal to accept the mysterious mark of the beast. Instead, they honor God as a creator and demonstrate their loyalty by keeping all His commandments. Among these commandments, the Sabbath stands out as a divine sign chosen by God to set His faithful apart from those who are unfaithful. The Sabbath serves as a seal of God's law in end time, symbolically placed upon the foreheads of the saints, a representation that His covenant people uphold His law in their minds and hearts continually. The metaphor of the seal upon the forehead of the people of the book is also found in the book of Revelation. God's servants at the end of time, the spiritual children of Abraham, though they belong to every nation and ethnicity, must be sealed with the seal. Abraham's spiritual children must faithfully keep all of God's universal, eternal, and unchanging commandments. For God's judgments on earth are waiting for God's faithful people to learn of the seal of loyalty, the Sabbath, and by keeping the Sabbath holy, the spiritual children of Abraham are sealed and made secure against the time of the end. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, "Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." Revelation 7 verses 2 and 3. This naturally brings us back to the man-made law of worship found in Revelation 13. The first beast represents the Roman Catholic power, which has attempted to change God's universal, eternal, and unchanging law. See Daniel 7 verse 25. To further its objectives, the Roman papacy seeks to place its mark on the same locations, the hand and the forehead, that Moses associated with remembering God's law. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand." Revelation 14 verse 9. Now, it might be best to plainly quote from the beast's power, from Roman Catholicism itself, about how it claims the authority to change the seal of God's universal, eternal, and unchanging law. So by glancing briefly at history, we will easily understand the nature of the future law on the day of worship. Since most people in Islamic countries do not grow up attending church on either Sabbath or Sunday, you may not be fully aware of what is happening. So, before we move on to quote, let us first explain in more detail. For over 4,000 years, God's faithful people kept the seventh day of the week, the Sabbath, holy. However, as individuals within the Apostolic Church began to seek personal honor and power, they gradually centralized authority within what became the Roman Church, eventually controlled by the Roman papacy. As a result, they changed the day of worship from the true Sabbath to Sunday, the day of the sun, a false day of worship. This great apostasy first took root in Rome and later spread to Egypt. The reason for this change was that the Jews had been falsely accused of burning down Rome in 64 AD. Then, in 70 AD, Jerusalem was utterly destroyed and the Jewish nation was nearly annihilated, with Jews being hunted almost extermination. Under such intense pressure, leaders in the church at Rome believed that by changing the day of worship to Sunday, they could easily distinguish Christians from Jews and thus reduce persecution. Additionally, they thought that adopting Sunday worship would make it easier for pagans to join the church. Then, over a period of about 200 years, the papacy gradually led most of the churches scattered throughout the Roman Empire to observe Sunday, despite the fact that there is not a single word in the Bible or from true prophets indicating that God had changed his holy day of worship from the Sabbath to Sunday or from the Sabbath to Friday. Here is what Roman Catholicism says about its own arrogant action. The Church of God has thought it well to transfer the celebration and observance of the Sabbath to Sunday. God says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." This is his universal, eternal, and unchanging day of worship. But instead of faithfully following God's commandment, when man chooses to remember a different day as holy, then the difference between the fear of God and the fear of man very quickly becomes apparent. In our next video, we will see how God is warning people not to submit to this arrogant human authority.